Hello, my name is Amanda, and welcome to Back to the Heart, a podcast for self-discovery, healing, and embracing true freedom. And I invite you to join me as we embark on a transformative journey back to your heart, where we get to choose love over fear. What if the words you speak, the plants you connect with, and the people you surround yourself with are all part of your healing? Welcome to Back to the Heart, beautiful souls. Today I am joined by one of my favorite returning guests, Ryan Sprague, cannabis educator, consciousness coach, and the host of the Highly Optimized podcast, just to name a few. And in this episode, we dive deep into what Ryan calls the Holy Trinity of Healing: words, plant medicine, and community. Three of my favorite things. We explore how conscious language can shift your stories, how plant medicine amplifies awareness, and how community becomes the mirror that helps you remember who you really are. Whether you're curious about integrating plant medicine, deepening your self-awareness, or finding your people on the healing path, this conversation will inspire you to embody your truth and live in alignment with your highest vibration. Today, I wanted us to talk about my three favorite things that have been a massive part of my healing journey. And I say that in a place of, I don't want people to get in the loop of the healing journey forever, because these things that help me in my healing journey are also what is helping me maintain and live my best self, my every day of my life, continuing to move forward. And that's words, which we started in on, plant medicine, and community. And all three of those pieces, it's not just been one of those things. And honestly, it's taken all three. And I just wanted to talk about all three of those pieces individually with you, how they are connected. If you really think about our healing and our everyday well-being, it's our mind, our body, and our spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And our mind, our words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our body, which definitely craves that community and that touch, that physical touch and connection with others, but also creates and desires that connection with Pachamama and with the plants. But our spirit definitely has the receptors and all the communication of, that's how we really make that connection with that oneness of each other and of Pachamama, to me, has been through that spirit and the connection with psychedelics and with plant medicines. It just makes sense that they're all interconnected to each other. And I started with the Awakened community, and then, came across your work, and then Mark's with Enlifted, and then you were connected with Enlifted, and then the Beats and Breath and the Breathe with Cannabis. These communities, it's just so powerful. Which one of these you want to start with, Ryan?
Oh my goodness. I mean, they're all equally valuable. I think we'll start with community, just because for me, I think this is what most people are aware is maybe their issue. Now, again, obviously challenges span the scope of mind, body, and spirit. But I think if we asked most like just normal people, like, hey, do you think you have a mental problem, a community issue, or like a spiritual connection or disconnection issue? I think most people would probably resonate with the community thing first, especially after the pandemic and what that kind of did. Rach and I were just talking about that the other day, that for people like you and I, people that also listen to your podcast, it was probably just a couple of years of cheap flight prices and, amazing get-togethers, which is what it was for me. But now looking back in hindsight of like people that aren't a part of like this world of self-development, yeah, I can see it. Like a lot of friends that used to, go out all the time and do these things are now just kind of staying in their house. And again, I'm not judging, but it's just interesting to see and observe those things. And so I think one of the things that most people are not aware with community and why it matters so much Because I think people know it matters, but they don't really know why. And again, any of these answers are just my personal opinions. We'll go back and forth on them. But why I think relationships and community are so valuable is because they are mirrors for ourselves. So if you choose to believe what I do, which I imagine our beliefs are probably pretty similar with A Course in Miracles and things like that, then really what we're experiencing here is a dream in which we are separate from God. That's the myth, right? And that's the myth that I think is the whole entire point to overcome here. And I think when you overcome that, you reach enlightenment. And I think enlightenment is nothing more than just seeing the dream for what it is, waking up within the dream, just like we all dream at night. We could lucid dream. It's the same kind of idea. And so, as a result of that, if we're all one being, then how does one being learn about itself? Well, it can learn about itself through the illusion of the separate self, right? Us individually. But if I meet someone else, and I saw this happen in the Enlifted community, I had, that was the first kind of self-development community I'd ever joined. I had done some stuff with Paul Chek, but, he's in California and he wasn't doing Spirit Gym at that point. So there was no online kind of stuff happening. But when I started hanging around Enlifted, they started validating me for things that I didn't even see in myself. So as I would be hanging out with Adam Chin and Mark and all these people, and I'm hanging out and I'm talking and I'm just being me, they'd be like, "Man, you're so funny." Like, "Oh, you're so this, you're so that." And I'm like, "Well, that's really interesting. I've never really seen myself in that way before." And there were parts of me that didn't want me to own those things. Based on now having done some work on this, realizing that at some point in my childhood, I learned that it was unsafe to shine too bright. And so basically, ever since then, I've been the person when someone's like, "Wow, you're so good at guitar," or whatever. I'm like, "Oh, thanks, but you're really good at this too." I have this unconscious tendency to get a little spidey sensey, like we were talking about before with the changing out the word trigger. But my spidey senses came up when people would compliment me. Never even really noticed it. I all noticed this in hindsight. So as I was hanging out with them, it was my ability to start owning, like, yeah, I am that person. Like, oh my goodness, yeah. And that's what got me to be the person I am today, is hanging around other people that were also on a similar journey of self-development. And really what that is like, I think of it like this. Some people love sculpting their muscles. Some people love sculpting a business. Some people love sculpting consciousness. And some people do a lot of those things. But I think when you're someone who sculpts consciousness and you get around other people that also are really motivated and inspired to sculpt consciousness, there is an incredible thing that can happen. Because also within that, as you're sculpting your consciousness, what do you realize about the people that maybe do trigger you or whatever? That those are actually just as valuable, even though your ego will try to tell you they're just annoying or whatever. They're just as valuable because they're you. So what part of you have you not accepted back into wholeness yet? Because that is what's required of you to reach enlightenment and to see through the full dream, is to see the things out there, and you can discern. Like if you see someone who's a murderer, for instance, you can have compassion for them, understanding that somewhere in their psyche, they thought and mistook that for being the right action to take. You can have compassion, but you can also have clear discernment. I'm not going to surround myself with that person. I'm not going to try to be friendly with that person. But it doesn't mean I then need to hold hate in myself. Because if I do, that's like taking poison and expecting it to hurt the other person. So I think that's a big part of why I think community is, for me, what opened up the ability to become more aware of my words, to become more aware of where plant medicine was taking me, because I was around other people that could actually like articulate some of these things that are very ineffable when you're on plant medicine, versus when I was doing plant medicine with, friends, festivals, whatever. It was a lot of fun. I had a blast, but the memories were more 3D based, right? Like, oh my God, I remember when we went in that place and it was crazy. Not so much like, whoa, I just saw into the Akashic Records, because I didn't really know what the Akashic Records was, because I wasn't hanging out with anyone that also was into this stuff. So I think community for me was kind of the cornerstone that the mindset and the words, AKA, and the spiritual connection with plant medicine really started to like evolve into something that really transformed my entire reality.
Yeah, definitely. Because whenever you start digging into the use of plant medicine, and, if you are using it as a tool to dig into, whatever traumas or whatever word you want to use that you've got, hey, I've got some stuff I want to clean up. if you start using plant medicine without the proper tools on the other side of it, it can almost make things much more scary and more confusing when you don't have the tools of either a community to help you in the integration and going through the process, walking through it, or in utilizing the tools that we both know through Enlifted, and even with, the Breathe with Cannabis, with utilizing the breath itself, right? And processing through those emotions. It's so powerful, because if you just come up with a story or something and you don't know what to do with it, now it's just louder and bigger in your face, and it's like, fuck, like I knew it was a problem, but I didn't know it was that big, and like, now what do I do with it? So
Mm-hmm.
it's so important to have, other people that can hold the light for you and give you that guidance along the way. And, that's why I wanted to, and am in process of starting this new coaching program with you, with the Coaching with Cannabis. So let's switch over and go towards that, and tell
Yeah.
me all the exciting things that I'm going to get to experience in this new coaching certification, because people on the podcast have heard me talking all about Enlifted, which is a like rock solid method to help people with their stories and with their stuckness, and helping them with their wins and celebrating themselves. Like you said, it's just such an incredible community, because I'm going to say the same thing, right? Is that I'd been around a lot of people that I hadn't heard those things shared with me about my greatness. And it's taking me a process to start to absorb those in, and being able to utilize these tools with the breath work and the breath and re-regulating. I'm able to absorb it in a different way. And now it's like, this is so cool. Now I have another tool in my tool belt to be able to help people with the cannabis, because it has been such a big part of my journey. So what am I in for, and what would other people be ready to see if they decided to join me in this coaching program?
Yeah, well, first, Amanda, thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you in the program. I think you're going to be absolutely amazing because you already have the Enlifted stuff. And I teach that in there as well, because really what I found is that, joining storywork, and which is for everyone listening, I'm sure you guys know this, but the Enlifted Method, joining storywork with cannabis was the only thing I think in the world that could have made storywork even more wild, because I've watched story work in a sober state change people's lives over and over again. I've been one of those people. But at the end of the day, I'll tail on to something you were saying. This will lead into the program. Think about what plant medicine is and why things like community and language and mindset and all these things matter beforehand. Because plant medicines are nothing other than non-specific amplifiers. So if you don't really know what you're choosing to amplify, I mean, think about like before you and I got into this kind of work, all right? I imagine we probably had at least some awareness around like healthy habits and things like that. But I can tell you, even 6 years ago, I had a lot of really shitty stories running in the background of my life, didn't know they existed because I hadn't done the self awareness work yet to start to realize how present those were in my life. And so, as I would connect with plant medicine, those stories would get heightened. It would be very anxiety provoking a lot of the time, but I wouldn't really know what to do with that information. So, I was just pretty much being a masochist, just like making my issues way more present and then going back to normal state and being like, oh, life is so weird, and then doing it again and not really knowing what to do in that state. And so after I went through and lifted and a lot of the other things I did with Paul Chek and whatnot, now I actually know what to do when certain things get amplified. So it's kind of like a potentiator. And so think of it this way, right? Like if your engine can't go fast and you choose to put NOS on it, nitric oxide, what do you think is going to happen? The engine's going to blow up and something weird's going to happen because you haven't done the legwork to be able to handle that kind of power in a car that wasn't built for it. So that's kind of how I think about plant medicine and especially like what these things actually do for us. And so when it comes to Coach with Cannabis, this is my magnum opus. This is what I've been working on for really 6 years. It's all of my programs combined. And, again, we don't touch on a lot of growing in there, but I give you guys the grow course so you can go through that. It's another magnum opus I created. And so really what you're going to be going through is 6 months of education, but also hands-on training. And so we have 3 different paths in this program. We have the knowledge path, which is going to be taught through my lectures. We have the practice path, which is going to be taught by Shelley in the whole, like, really getting practicum lessons and being able to trade off with other students in the program, so that by the time you leave, it's not like one of these things, because I've gone through a lot of these types of programs where you learn all this amazing stuff, you get a certification, but you've never really done it. And so now you leave the program and you're like, what do I do? How do I do this? And so after going through enough of those programs, I realized, the education is handy. It's definitely applicable and definitely valuable. But at the end of the day, the best thing someone can get from a program is real world experience, where they have someone, a coach, practitioner, etc. They can say, hey, Amanda, I noticed you did that right there. What was that? Right? And you might even not even notice you had done something. And so you can be like, oh, wow, that was out of my purview. So by the time you end the program, you've done 12 of these practice sessions, and we usually throw in a couple bonuses too. And so at the end of the day, you're getting ample opportunity to have your questions answered, to see, like, what parts of this do I really like? Because we talk about a lot of different modalities in there too. We kind of have the core ones that we'll kind of focus on, like storywork and IFS, integrated family systems. But we talk about breath work, we talk about somatic work, we talk about Tai Chi and energy work, we talk about all these different things. And we also have other people come in the third path, which is called the embodiment path, so that you actually get to experience cannabis in the way that you're learning how to teach other people. Because the other thing I realized was that experiential knowledge is so much more valuable than just intellectual knowledge. Like, at the end of the day, you could go on ChatGPT and you could look up a bunch of things around cannabis. Now, most of the stuff in there, aside from like the history and the science stuff, I've kind of just come up with as ideas. But you could definitely teach cannabis without my ideas, right? You could do it. But what you can't get anywhere else, what you can't get through ChatGPT and whatever, is the hands-on training and also the experience of how cannabis works in the way that we teach. And so what I have is I have a couple different breathe with cannabis ceremonies that people will go through, but also we have other people that come in and do totally different things. Like, you'll get to meet Zipporah, who does tantra work with cannabis. You'll get to meet Jen Wynn, that does trauma work with cannabis, so that you guys aren't just seeing me. Because that's one thing that Mark did really well, and I took a page out of his book, is that he understood that people might start thinking of him as a guru, right? If he's the only one out there doing story work and that's the only example, they might start feeling like they need Mark. And so Mark is really good at being like, nope, watch Mike Salemi do it. Nope, watch this guy do it. Watch all these other people that aren't me do it. So you guys never think you have to do it the exact way I do. Because the way I do it is just the way that I do it. It's not the best way. It's not the right way. It's just me and my authenticity. And so by the end of the program, you've gotten the knowledge so you can talk the talk. You've gotten the practice so you can walk the walk. And you've gotten the embodiment all together so you can become the walk. And you can become the cannabis expert that goes way beyond just intellectual knowledge. Because there's a lot of people out there that, and I give great credit to them. Like, there's a lot of amazing people out there that teach cannabis that are really up on the science happening and things like that. To me, I don't need any more evidence that cannabis is a positive force in my life, because number one, I also realize that I am the creator of my reality. So someone like Andrew Huberman that wants to go out there and say cannabis is bad, well, he's not wrong. It's just he's not right objectively either. He's right subjectively, because he's creating a whole world where cannabis is bad because he's using certain information that's biased to make his conclusion. I don't share his myth. So I don't really need to go into the science that much anymore or anything, because I just understand how cannabis works for me as an individual. But I still teach it because obviously I realize a lot of the clients that you might work with are going to be interested on what the endocannabinoid system is, what the receptor sites are, how cannabis interacts with serotonin and these kind of things. But that's why I've created the program the way I've created it, because I want it to be, first of all, a lot of fun. And second of all, I want it to really capture all three of those pillars: the intellectual knowledge, the practice, and the embodiment of the actual teaching. So that's what you're in for when you get in there. And we also have amazing people that went through the last round that will still be in there. And our goal is really to create a decentralized node network of individuals that can partner with each other, that can say, hey, I might want to do breath work, and I love that, but I don't do cannabis stuff. Just like Chris and I, right? Chris and I are a perfect example. Chris reached out on Instagram to me after he saw me on Aubrey Marcus and was like, dude, I've been looking for someone who does plant medicine, and I hadn't even thought about cannabis, but this is perfect. Should we hop on a call and talk about this? And I was like, yeah. And the next week we were on a call, and then literally 2 weeks later, we did our first Breathe with Cannabis. So, again, connections in this space are everything. And that is what I really feel I'm best in the world at. And I'm really like amplifying in all the programs I do now is connecting you to all the people you're going to need to know. Connecting you to people that understand how to create 508c1a trusts and get out of the income tax system. Getting, you aware of people that know how to work with crypto so that you can understand how to put your money in crypto or how to even get paid through crypto if that resonates with you. How to market in the cannabis space because we can't do the things that other people can do. We can't do ads. We can't, I've done everything completely organically, not just because I enjoy that, but because there's really nothing else I can do. And so because of that, I've realized a lot of the things that people will get stalled at. And that's what I put in the program is a lot of these bonuses, and a lot of the bonus stuff that I never promise on the offer, I just kind of give it to people after, which is like, hey, you're connected to my whole community now. So whatever you need, let me know, and I guarantee I have someone that can do it. It's pretty funny actually. Through Enlifted, Rachel and I have called each other Bubby for years. And when I met Danny Rios, who you know through the Awaken community, this is God 5 years ago before he knew Danny Morel or I knew Danny Morel or anything. We were traveling throughout Mexico together, and there was a couple other people with us. And once they took off and went on their own adventures, it was just me, Rachel, and Danny. And so he just started calling us Bubbies. And we called him Bubby. And then it just took off in the Enlifted community to a point where I went to a party one time. And when I walk in the door, this is in Austin, some girl's like, "Are you a Bubby?" And I was like, I literally started that. And that was like one of those cool moments where I was like, wow, I got that far. But the reason I mentioned this is because the whole idea of it was, hey, whatever you need, we have a Bubby for that. And so I've had this idea and this kind of thing, breeding into me for the last 5 years. And now it's really starting to take legs in new ways. And so that, I think, personally, is the biggest thing that I would say someone gets in the program. Like, yeah, the knowledge is great, the practice is great, you're going to be certified, but you're connected to my network. And I don't know anyone who does networking better than I do because it's one of my natural God-given talents. I never had to work at it. A lot of other things I did have to work really hard to get good at. This is just something that came to me naturally. And because you already know Enlifted, like all of our tribes stay very close together. Like, my Czech crew knows Enlifted, knows my community. I got this guy, Ron, who's bringing his whole community in. And we're just starting this thing where it's like pretty soon, we won't even need to market through Instagram or whatever. We'll have 300 to 500 people in a room, school room, that will be able to just say, hey, my name is Amanda. I have this offer. Does anyone here resonate with this in their business? And people like me or anyone who does something similar to plant medicine will say, hey, that's actually great. What do you do for affiliate deals? And you'll say, hey, I give 10%, 20%, whatever it is. And those people can decide, okay, give me your copy and I'll blast my email list for your offer. And boom, now they make some side cash while they're not promoting any offers through your thing. Now you guys have made a connection. You can joint venture together. And that's the real world that I'm starting to create because that's how you win in this space, like
Yeah.
it's really who you know. So yeah.
I really, that resonates so much. And I'm really seeing that because it's like, we're all out here sharing our gifts, right? And congratulations, we got to a point where we're stepping forward and putting our gifts out there for the world,
Yeah.
right? But we're all still trying to do all the same stuff to get our gifts out there. So it's like, why don't we just trade these with each other, right? Here we are. I may be great at one piece and that guy's great at something else. And we're recreating a whole new community. And, like you said, after, what's happened in the last 5 years, and then what I foresee is going to happen in the next 5 with AI, that community is even more important for us to just stay connected and to be able to help ground each other and lift each other up at the same time. It's really powerful.
It really is. And, one of the quotes that I live my life by is that man or woman has a duty or an obligation to break unjust laws. And when we look at these centralized systems, right, like, and I know you'll get this, I know your listeners will get this, but it is very interesting who doesn't get it. I was just talking to a friend of mine who is not a part of this world whatsoever. And, he was mentioning that, like, oh man, I can't believe so many people didn't believe the vaccine was good. Right. And I'm just like, I've just learned with these kind of people, just like, oh yeah, like it's kind of like I know how hard it is to change my mind. I'm not going to be naive and think it's going to be easy to change their mind. They're choosing their myth. That's okay, right? Any experience is valid in the eyes of Creator. Who am I to tell them they're wrong? But what I will say is the lack of ability for a lot of people to use discernment is frightening, because I'm like, these are the same people that created the opiate epidemic and then also created the things to fix the opiate epidemic. These are also the same people that I've watched for years put people in jail that were trying to help people cure cancer through cannabis. So by the time the pandemic happened, I had already seen these people for who they are. And again, any experience is valid in the eyes of Creator. They're playing the negative polarity. They're Darth Vader, and it takes a Darth Vader to make a Luke Skywalker. So I see their point here, but I don't need to be naive enough to think that these people are going to change their tune just because the ad has a cool jingle to it. I know who they are. I've clocked them. And they're the same people that start Instagram, start even Twitter. Like, all these people are, in my opinion, the bad actors. So is it their fault or my fault when I don't plan accordingly and they show up exactly who they've always showed up as? It can only be their fault maybe once. It's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So once I started seeing these things happen, once I started realizing that I'm on Instagram talking to people about how to use a natural plant to help heal their mind, body, and spirit, and I'm getting shadow banned while OnlyFans stars are blowing up. And I'm not saying that's bad, but it showed me it's my responsibility to figure out a way around this. I can't keep just complaining about, oh man, Instagram shadow bans me, whatever. It's like, no, of course they do. Of course they do that. Duh, that's completely in alignment with who they've already shown to be. So that's why now I'm like, okay, what a great opportunity in disguise. Because one of the things that Enlifted validated in me is my ability to create community. And so now I'm like, okay, great opportunity that I wouldn't have had if I didn't have this challenge of the centralized systems doing what they're choosing to do. So I choose to look at it with, the help from Enlifted and all these things. I choose to create a narrative where this is actually happening for me. And so if I want to see that reality, I have to create it for myself. And so this is what I get to do. And it's fun because now you and I, the Enlifted community, all these people, we get to hang out and work together. And we get to become the Wu-Tang clan of self-development. It's like we all have our individual brands and our individual skill sets. But when we all come together, holy shit, everyone wants to be a part of that crew because we have all the answers when it comes to fitness, mind, body, spirit, all these things, everything down to common law, whatever it is. We have a bubby for that. And so what an amazing opportunity that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have these centralized systems showing up in the way they did, and so I'm very grateful to be able to create very good myths for myself because, again, nothing is objective here. It's not that it is objectively an opportunity that Instagram's doing this. I'm just creating a reality in which I'm telling myself it is. And so therefore, abracadabra, it is. And so I think that's really cool. And I'm very grateful to, kind of see where the world is going because a lot of people are getting back to what I call decentralization. And anyone who likes cannabis was already a fan of decentralization. Think about it. Cannabis was illegal since 1937 up until, let's say, 2012, right around there. Maybe it was decriminalized, whatever, but there were no stores, but yet everyone still found cannabis. How were they able to? Well, decentralized network. One of the funniest things was when the pandemic happened, all of a sudden, all these dispensaries weren't essential businesses and had to shut down. And yet, no one I know went without cannabis, and that's a perfect example of decentralization. We're not going to have these goofballs tell us what we can and can't do. We're natural human beings here. We have our own autonomy and free will. We're going to do whatever we want to do. And that for me is decentralization. It's saying, nope, we're pirates. We're going to do it our own way. And thanks, but no thanks. Because we can contract out of their system whenever we choose to. We just have to choose it. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's exciting though that there are more and more people that are coming to this realization. And, maybe it took the pandemic for some people to open their eyes and even for us to be able to see each other over the crowd of, of the sheep or whatever, to be able to see each other and connect in a different way that we weren't standing out. And, for myself, I left the job or I released a job, parted ways from a job. And it was one of the first like really big things that I really stood up for myself and stood for. And it was one of those points where I was well past the time that I could or should have left that job. I was really unhappy. And that was that forceful moment that really put me to the edge of, are you going to do this or what? And I was like, no, this was really a big inspiring moment to traject me to a completely different place, right? Of standing up for myself, for listening to my body, for really feeling into me and making a decision on what felt right for myself. And I think really has pushed people to see how many others are so clouded. And, for me, before all of that, I had been going through a health journey and had endometriosis. So I had gone through all of this cleansing of looking at, parasites and, actual clean water without fluoride and, organic foods and grass fed and all the things. Like I'd already done all that physical health side. And I think that if people haven't done that piece, they're literally in such a fog of distortion
Yeah.
from, whether it's the things they're pumping into the weather, the water, the words that we're using, and you're listening to media, social media, anything, like it's really hard to step out of that, honestly.
It is.
And something gets to people and they make a choice. And for me, it wasn't an elective choice whenever my physical health pushed me into a place. So it's like, if I can be as shiny as possible and as you are, right? That we can share with people and shine so fucking bright that they see it before they get to a point of like, I'm so sick. I just have no option, or, oh, I just lost my job because they cut my program, or I don't want to get your shot, or whatever it is that happens, or you get divorced or anything. Like you can see things before the train crashes, because you can see somebody else is shining their light and they were able to make a difference. Then it's just one more step in that direction. But I couldn't see anything. I mean, with all those distortions, and then you add in the alcohol, which is everywhere. And not that, I'm saying don't ever drink anything, but when it became such a part of, do you want to watch a sporting event? Do you want to watch a concert? Is it a wedding? Is it a graduation? Is it anything? Is always around alcohol. It was like dates and all the pieces, right? So it was just another distorting thing that's been put in people's eyes. So how could they possibly see something that seems so clear to us with the plant medicine, but with all those distortions, people just
I mean, you know what it is too? Paul talks about this a lot. Pain is an amazing teacher if you allow it to be. Like most people, including myself, grew up thinking that pain was just like a Advil deficiency. Like, oh, I have a headache, I just haven't taken enough Advil today. That's how most people treat pain, whatever it is. Emotional pain, they numb with alcohol or whatever it is, cannabis, whatever it is. And I have a lot of compassion because I was that person at one point in my life. But there comes a point where you realize you can live life one of two ways. You can keep trying to get out of pain, or you can start trying to run towards pleasure. And so for me, what I realized was a lot of my life was spent trying to get out of pain. But just like they tell NASCAR drivers when they're teaching them how to race, what do they say when they're spinning out? Don't look at the wall, because where attention goes, energy flows.
yes.
So if you're focused on getting out of pain, guess what your body and your mind is hearing? I want to still feel that there's pain. And so pain starts to become a teacher when you actually start to listen to it. But the reason I have so much compassion is because I realize now, and I'll continue to realize even more as my consciousness continues to wake up. But I realized, like, just like you're saying, like, holy shit, like they did a fucking world-class job at what they did. Like, I have a lot of respect, or like maybe respect is too kind of a word. I have a lot, like, I'm aware of what the elites have done. Okay. Like, I don't enjoy them. Discernment wise, they're not my flavor of ice cream whatsoever. But you got to have a little respect for the system they built, because a lot of people are going around saying like, oh, they're dumb, they're stupid. Like, no, 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 don't get it twisted. They are extremely intelligent people. They're just coming from the negative polarity. So, again, negative polarity is all about service to self, controlling you through fear, all of that. So once you see it for what it just is, okay? But, at the same time, if you don't make that choice, right, and you stay in the sea of indifference of like, where am I going to go? Negative or positive polarity, service to self, service to others, then you kind of can't start to wake up because you're just, I mean, you're teeter-tottering. It's like the people that get the vax and they listen to Alex Jones. It's like, what are you doing? That's just creating a lot of friction in their life, right? So, again, at the end of the day, I think that for me, there's only one game here. Like the only game is to wake up, because in a dream where nothing is real, nothing real can actually be threatened. So the only thing I take with me in these illusions of separation, these illusions of lifetimes, is the ability of me to wake my consciousness up to what's really going on here. And so I just did an email the other day, or I think it actually might go out tomorrow, all about thirst traps. We were talking about like saying spidey sense instead of trigger. Well, I like thirst traps instead of like, programming or like any of these kind of things that we know they're doing, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
through television and all these things. I like to think of those things as thirst traps because for me, it makes me giggle. And laughter is the best medicine because laughter is what reminds you none of it's real anyway. And
Like
so for me,
clickbait.
yeah, exactly. And so I see these things like the news, what mayor got elected in New York City and everyone's freaking out. Like I see them all as just thirst traps, things vying for your attention that you can either spend your attention and intention focusing on those things that, guess what, you're not going to change. Okay. They're not meant to be able to be changed. They're meant to give you the illusion that you can change them through voting or whatever, but they have their way they're going to do it. And so it's meant to uprile you. That's why it's there. Because when you're upriled and you're in chronic fight or flight, you can't critically think about like, hey, why don't I center myself? Why don't I start to actually ask myself, instead of complaining why all these 1% don't pay taxes, why don't I just ask myself, how do they not pay taxes? Can I figure that out? Because again, like that's where the real power is. Like there's nothing they're doing you can't also do from a light side. But if you continue to just complain and go out drinking with people and complain about your coworkers and all these things that I'm sure we've both done in our lifetime, they
Oh
just
yeah.
didn't lead to anywhere good for me. So eventually I had to realize if I want a better life, I have to start being better for me subjectively. I have to start making better choices. I have to do this. I can't blame, I can't project, I can't do these things that felt very safe to do, but actually are like the cocaine of the projection world. Cocaine's a similar thing, right? Fortunately, I never got into it, but from what I've seen, seems like when people do it, they probably don't just do it once, right? They want it over and over again because it feels good to a small part of them. And then the next day, they feel terrible and they want to do it again, right? And that's kind of how blaming, projecting, victimizing yourself feels. Feels really good in the moment. But then when your life gets worse and worse, you don't know what to do to change it. And then you get diagnosed with depression and you get on pharmaceuticals and the whole thing continues. So it's interesting.
And it's a quick distraction, a numbing of the symptom, but then it comes back and then your need and desire for more is more and more. That's not enough.
Yeah, exactly. And it never ends because that's what the negative polarity is. That's what cocaine and alcohol come from, is the negative polarity. You always want more. Like when I was on pharmaceuticals when I was 16, I got to try Adderall. And so like I felt like the most powerful I had ever felt. But like as I started to do that more, I started to realize now in hindsight, I didn't know this as a 17-year-old, but like there was this like feeling of like enough is never enough. And so like I know what that like force power feels like from the negative polarity, where like, I've seen when I've been at like clubs or whatever. I was actually at this party one time. This is actually a funny story. I was at a party one time. I went to an after party and me and my friends had taken LSD. And we were starting to come down when we left the club. So we are like, all right, I think we can manage a house party. So we drive out of this house party. My buddy drove. I did not drive on acid. That would be crazy. But we get to this house party, and it was like literally a small little house. And actually, the same town that Rachel's from was before I met her. But like very like old town, like pine trees everywhere. And then this woman who was a DJ was just throwing like a crazy set of their house. And they had soundproofed this house exceptionally well. Like I walked up at the door, didn't hear anything. Door opens, it's like wow, 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 like dubstep, like crazy. I'm like, holy shit. So we're in the main kind of room. There's two rooms. The room with the stage or makeshift stages, it's like a garage. And we're all hanging out, we're having fun, smoking joints, like me, three of my friends, the two friends that brought us there. We were kind of all in the same vibe. I don't know if they took anything, but we were all having fun, dancing. And then around, I don't know, it's probably like 4:30 in the morning, I was kind of feeling like I want to sit down for a second. So the couches and everything were in this other room that I hadn't gone into yet. And so it's funny because this has happened to me a couple times where, like I said, I've never done cocaine. So, and my friends haven't, like my friends don't either. We just don't mess with it. So there's been a couple times where I've unknowingly ended up at a coke party. And that's that negative polarity feeling. And you can see it, right? Everyone in there, when I first got in there, everyone still has coke. Everything's fine. They're laughing, they're joking, they're having fun, they're blowing lines, whatever. And then I literally watched this happen, Amanda, right? So we're sitting in there, we're kind of just taking a breather, we're hanging out, talking, we're getting tired. It's like 4:30 a.m. And I hear from over there, like, wait a minute, what happened to the bag? And then I'm kind of like, in two worlds. And so like I'm talking to my buddy, but I'm hearing this because immediately I'm like, oh God, I know what happens after this. So then this person's like, well, maybe it's over here. And they're going around trying to find it. And then they've discovered that it's missing. And so then they're
Oh
like,
my
all right, who
God.
just left? Like, and the whole party gets into this like crazy, like, who the fuck stole it? We're gonna fuck them up. And immediately I'm like, yo, we gotta get the fuck out of here. This is just like, it's one of those things again where when the coke runs out, everyone is just like starts to get that crazy fucking power feeling of like, who do we rob? Who do we fuck over? And I'm like, I'm the fuck out of here. That's why I've never liked that energy. But that's what it is, right? So once you can see it, you can spot it, and once you spot it, you're like, all right, discernment, I'm not going to engage with that. But, again, like you're saying, yeah, it's extremely hard to see that when you're still, doing all the things that you and I both had to go through to get to where we are now. And I'm sure there are things I don't see now that I'll see in a year or two or 5 years or whatever that I was like, oh, how did I not see that? But that's just how it works. And that's why for me, there's only one game here, which is level your consciousness up. Everyone's looking for joy. Everyone's looking for connection. That's why anyone does drugs. That's why anyone does anything that we would say is like bad or like, oh, that might not lead to positive outcomes. They're all looking for joy and connection and love. And so if I can just up level my consciousness to be in that frequency all the time, then I win. That's how I look at life. So I'm very grateful that in this lifetime, you and I have learned enough to realize what's important to us.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and it does take a lot of it because, at 2018, a lot of my world was kind of falling apart and, falling apart for me, right? I see now, but I went through that healing of me healing my body of endometriosis in like 2021, of realizing all those things that were clouding and distorting my vision and kind of started on my healing. However, I didn't realize the words, right? That was still an issue. I was playing with plant medicine and abusing plant medicine and alcohol and was in that polarity club with people with cocaine. So I went to an extreme. So I knew a lot of great things and I was doing a lot of great things for myself. And then I wasn't doing a lot of great things for myself.
Yeah.
So I went extreme into that and was in that space of whenever you're telling that story, I've seen that happen a lot of times. And then I'm like, why are people licking things off of this dirty bathroom floor?
Yeah. Like,
Oh
I don't
my
want to do whatever the
God,
hell that
what's
is.
happening? And yeah, and then my like last cutout experience of seeing, but this is what it took for me in that moment to see, okay, I need to get out of this community that I was in. That community
Yeah.
was my trusted friend that gave me some cocaine had meth in it. And let me tell
Oh,
you,
God.
that like has such a high addictive, like, even though I realized later that this was like could have killed me in that moment and it scared me to death and like all the different pieces, I still wanted it so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, how did I get to this point? And fortunately, like soon after got in a relationship with somebody that was like, no, I don't want to be around that, because I would have just kept going, because
Mm-hmm.
I got into that new normal of who you're around is so incredibly powerful. And that was like the counteraction of the alcohol, because if you're drinking that much alcohol and the numbing, you had to have something to come back and actually function and pay the bills the next day. So you got to go to work. So it was more, it was partying, but then it was survival, and it was this vicious circle. And I got to that wall, to that point, and I was like, what? How did I get here so fast? Like, within, a year. But then I can look back now and say that story of that happening was less than 3 years ago. And now I've gone through tremendous quantum leaps in my life with intentional use of plant medicine, with intentional like community that is lifting me up, with addressing the words, with surrounding myself by people who are shiny and who still realize that we do have our shit and we want to work on it and we want to help each other, not like compete to be less shitty than each other.
Yeah.
It's like we want to help each other be better. And
Yeah.
it's just, it's incredible that that kind of shift is possible for people. And I want to share that. Like, less than 3 years. And here I am. I've 34, 35 podcast episodes in. I've met this amazing community. I have this incredible spouse that loves me. Like, it's just like everything is going in the right direction when just such a short 3D time frame ago, things were crashing really, really fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like, and I feel like now having the tools that I have with knowing how to properly utilize plant medicine and having the community and having this words and this coaching program, like what took me the last 3 years to figure out, I could do with somebody in 3 months.
Yeah. There's a
And then
potentiator.
you're on like a maintenance of how to do this stuff on your own, but let's help you clean up and get you back in the path that you actually want to go. And then here's the tools where you can do this yourself. You can do this once a month, breathe with cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
community. You have the tools, the resources, the people that are there. And then you're on your way to just like living the life that feels good. It feels aligned. It's not like one shitty drama after the next.
Yeah, like it can be so fucking good. Like the question I ask God every day is, can it get any better? Because the answer to any question is yes. So, that's the question. I kind of like play a little challenge with God. I'm like, prove it. Like, I bet you won't, and then God's always going to respond yes, aka I'm going to respond yes, aka we're all God. So at the end of the day, one of my favorite quotes that is a guiding light for me is love is the answer. Now, what was the question? Because if you think about it, why does anyone go to things like cocaine or anything? They're looking for love, but they're looking for love in the wrong places, in all the wrong places, like the song says,
Yep.
because they had a distorted view of what love was through their parents. So they're copying where they thought love was. But as you start to subtract all these programs, patterns, the word, all this stuff, as you start to subtract, which is why meditation's talked about through every religious and spiritual practice throughout the all time. They all agree you should do something in silence. And the reason for that is you start to remember all this shit really isn't you, and again, you're playing a game here. And in this game, there are awesome characteristics that you can allow to come forth in you. But there are also these things that can kind of get taught to you by players of the game that weren't that good at playing the game, like maybe parents or whatever. And we all have certain areas that maybe we're just not the best of the game. Maybe we're good in other areas, not in others. But, there are these certain things that we can learn that allow us to move closer towards what real love is. And once you start to find that, it feels silly to go backwards. But before you found that, it's kind of panicky, because you're being told your whole life, you're being led through this like conveyor belt in a way of like, now you gotta start going to kindergarten. Then when kindergarten ends, you got to start going to school. That takes 12 years. Then as soon as you're getting ready to leave, it's like, what are you going to do in college? And then you go to college, and then all of a sudden you're like poofed out the conveyor belt into the world, and you're like, I don't even know who the fuck I am. And now I'm supposed to buy a house and settle down and have kids and all these things before I even know who I am. And if you don't figure out what love is, and then you get a bunch of debt and you make a bunch of money, that just gets another amplifier. And that's how these things continue to happen because people don't have the space. People don't create the space in their lives because they maybe are unaware of the fact that they can have a decision here. They aren't aware of creating that space. And so they never actually get to ask the questions: who am I? What am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? What is my purpose? And that, I feel, is why plant medicine is so popular right now, because we have this society that is sped up as fuck, right? They're going so fast, they can only look here. They're missing everything around, right? And they've been going fast for so long, and they have so much bandwidth getting taken with them that they're terrified to slow down because they don't know if they're going to be able to keep paying bills or whatever it is. Because they were taught, like, okay, you're out of school, buy a house, get all this debt. And now they're like, oh, I'm just going to keep this going. And so, like, they don't really have a chance to slow down and look around. And so, as a result of that, if they don't have that ability to slow down, they're never actually going to realize any of the things that we're talking about here, right? And so, the
Yeah.
reason plant medicine is kind of the perfect bridge for this gap is that if I tell someone in that state, hey, go meditate for 60 days in a cabin and you'll meet God, they might believe me, but they're like, yeah, good fucking luck. I don't have 60 days. I can't even afford a cabin, right? But if I tell them, hey, you got 3, 4 hours, they're like, all right, yeah.
Right.
And then they're going to experience something that's so visceral that then they come back and they're like, okay, so like to get there more often, I do this thing called meditating and I do, okay, now I know why I'm doing that. Because people of today are used to quick dopamine hits. So if you want to like course correct them, they're going to need a grandiose experience. It's not going
Yes.
to be go to the mountain and meditate for 30 days. It's going to be like eat 5 grams of mushrooms, realize a lot of stuff, like just completely almost black out and realize, holy shit, I don't know what any of that was, but it felt more real than anything I've ever experienced. And that then can be a potentiator to be like, okay, now let me look into these things. They're kind of like a Trojan horse in a way. And that's why I love them so much. One of the many reasons, but very interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love it. It definitely cuts the, the time in the journey like in half, or I don't know what the number would be, but everybody's different.
Gives them a glimpse, it gives them a
Yeah.
glimpse of what they'd be working towards choosing this other path. Because their other path is already going so fast. They're like, dude, I need something quick to show me what the other path is, or I got to keep going. Like, I can't stop this path because they don't really know how good it can be on the other side. If they did, they would never be on that path still. So if you can show them in an intentional ceremony how good and what they're really missing out on, now they have buy-in power. They've had an experience. And like I was talking about back when I was talking about Coach with Cannabis, experiential knowledge is really the answer. You can tell someone, hey, you can feel so much more love, you can feel joy, and they're like, yeah, cool, I'm going to blow another line now. But if you actually give them like a 5 gram mushroom dose or a hero's dose of cannabis or an LSD journey and you guide them through it, and they start meeting God and crying tears of joy and everything, you don't need to convince them that they can feel more love. They're like, no, dude, I felt it. I know what you're talking about. That's what can really change people, I think, in the modern day world. And that's why plant medicine, I think, is the most amazing opportunity, but also something that can be really challenging. Because again, if someone's like, imagine someone's doing cocaine and like, oh, you mushrooms at 3 in the morning, that's going to amplify a lot of really, really weird shit and potentially fracture their psyche, but not because
Yeah.
mushrooms are dangerous, but because the user didn't know how to operate the tool. Just like if someone takes a hammer and slams their hand, we don't blame the hammer. We blame the guy or girl that was using the hammer. But people like to project. Oh, that didn't work for me, so it was their fault. And it's like, you fell back into the old patterns again. So it's interesting to watch for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's like the more, we say don't do something, the more people, like you said, you get focused on it. And then it's the more that it's restricted, the more misused and misinformation that is available out there. So it's like, if we made this more available and more education, then people would have an opportunity to use it more effectively.
Exactly. And if we make it
Just like
fun,
anything.
like,
Yeah.
like if someone's going to like strip clubs and doing cocaine, like trying to get them to wear a white robe and meditate in their room is like, they're like, I was having more fun over there, you know? And so like, we got to meet someone where they're at. We're not going to get like strippers or whatever in there, but like, bring them to a community where like people are like barbecuing, having fun, maybe some volcano bags going around. There's some things that they can resonate with. And so their guard comes down a little bit. It's not so much of like, whoa, this is way too serious. It meets them where they're at, and then they can get into the Vipassana retreats or whatever. But, I think that one of my favorite quotes is there's endless rivers that ultimately reach the same sea. The only one that's wrong is the one that tells you there's only one way to get there. And I think that's one of the other reasons I love plant medicine so much, because I think that there's so many people out there that try to make them wrong. And I genuinely love teaching through that point of view that there is no objective reality. Like, it's kind of like, it's a very trigger happy subject, right? Like drugs and, whatever. And so I think it's one of those areas where it has a lot of potential to change someone's life just in the speaking of it, right? If someone says, "Oh, I don't like cannabis, it rots your brain." Oh, where'd you learn that? Well, I don't know. I learned it in school. Oh, really? Can you bring up the study? Oh, do you know how studies are done in this country? And all of a sudden they start realizing, I don't know anything about this. I was just parroting something. And if you're aware enough to be like, hey, it seems like you don't really know anything about this. Is this your belief? Like, did you ever try cannabis? And they start to be like, well, no. And you have an opportunity to be like, cool, well, what do you believe? And maybe they believe the same thing, but it's like, cool, make it your belief. Don't just parrot what you heard in DARE class from policy enforcers that are all part of corporations that are just trying to take money from you. It's like people don't do enough digging into the people they're listening to. Discernment, right? It's the number one
Yeah.
muscle here of what true good is and what true evil is. And there's only one, because good and evil are actually the same thing. The way I think about it is God or the absence of God, aka what is or the absence of what is, or truth or the absence of truth. And so when people are coming from the absence of truth, if you're coming from truth, it's very easy to see. And the same way that if a kid, this is kind of how I look at it these days, you got to pick and choose your battles. When I first got into this, I wanted to help the whole world wake up, and that's still my mission in the way, but I'm not trying anymore. I'm just like the people that are ready, the same way I found Mark and Paul Check when I was ready. I didn't need to hear, like, they didn't need to panic and run around and tell everyone. They just did what they loved, podcasting, whatever it was, and the right people found them. So, again, like that's kind of my thing, because if you try to imagine a kid that's like 6 years old and they run in and they say the boogeyman's real, the boogeyman's not real. So you're like, ah, kid, get over it. The boogeyman's not real. That kid's probably going to feel even more terrified. It's not going to make that kid feel better. You have to kind of go in there with the kid and be like, all right, where was he? All right, I'm going to show you what we do to the boogeyman. We show him, we're the boogeyman. And you go onto the bed and like, you teach the kid like, hey, there's nothing to fear here. But you don't do it through like the level that you do it with another person that understands the boogeyman's not real, because the kid's not there yet. So with a lot of people in the world, like I was talking about with that person earlier, when they're like, "Oh, the vaccine's totally safe," I'm like, "Cool, awesome. I don't believe your myth, but I don't I don't need to change your mind, because I'm not right objectively. I'm just right in my own myth. If you want to create a world where that's bad, then guess what? It is bad, but not because it is bad or good, but because you created the world in which it is. And so again, at the end of the day, I think that for me, I just focus on what's the most love I can come from for myself first, but then also for other people. And that will always guide me home, and if I can have a lot of fun doing it, because fun is, I think, the entire point of all of this, then all the better. And that's, I think, what I've really got into over the past like 3 years is making all of this a lot more fun. And I think that's why I love Enlifted so much. One of the many reasons is because they taught me you can do self-development work and make fun and light of all of it, because it is all just a belief system at the end of the day. Trauma ceases to exist if you stop believing in it. It really be that simple. Why not?
Yeah. And if people want to think that it's about, childhood traumas, then it's about childhood play as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's one way and it's the other. And, we've forgotten how to do a lot of those things that just brought us pure joy with no like purpose of, can I make money doing this? Is this the
Yeah.
best use of my time? Do I have time for this? Like, no, I just want to do this. Why? Am I going to look silly? Who cares? Is somebody going to laugh at me? Who cares? Like, I just do whatever.
Yeah, it's so much more enjoyable that way. And that's really the life that we all have the opportunity to live, and like I hope I can be an example for anyone, as you can be an example for anyone. Like, for the listeners tuning in, guys, like, you know, if you want proof that you can do whatever you want, okay? I literally took something called cannabis, where it was illegal for years, and then the only legal definition people had of it was, I want to get really fucked up on it. And I created a whole world in which cannabis is a psychedelic. And there was only like one other guy out there that was talking about this, but it was very under the radar. Hamilton Souther is a good buddy of mine. And now, 6 years later, I have Breathe with Cannabis, I have Coach with Cannabis, I have the Conscious Cannabis Collective, I have all the different courses I run. I've gotten on my Idols podcast. I'm personal friends with them. I hook up people with my flower, like Sugar Sean O'Malley, and like, it's insane. And this was all just a dream. This was all simply something that I was like, I feel this to be true, and I'm going to go out there and talk about it. It wasn't like I went out there and became a fitness coach, which again, no diss on that. It's just that that's already out there, right? So if you wanted to be a fitness coach, you can follow a path, right? Some people have done it. I had no fucking clue what I was doing. I had no business knowledge. I didn't go to school for business. I had all the limiting beliefs and the weird stories, but I just had a dream coming from love. And love is the answer. Now, what was the question? If you follow that, it will lead you to the people, places, and things that will perfectly set up who you need to work with to overcome some of the things that are currently blocking you. But if you always come from your heart, you'll always end up in the right places with the right people doing the right things. I wish it was more logical in a way, because I know most of the world is in a left brain state like I was for a long time, where they're like, yeah, but like, what are the specifics? And I get it. I understand that questioning. But like you were saying, and like Rachel's taught me a lot, life is so not logical. Life is so energetic. And it frustrates, I know a lot of men specifically, because we come from that left brain point of view. You women understand it a lot better. You guys are a lot more wise than most men when it comes to what is really going on here, even if you can't articulate it, because none of us really learn it. But at the end of the day, as you start to live more energetically, shit just works out. And it's always the stuff that you actually wanted to work out. It's, for me, it was for a long time. I started to think like, okay, I just started this business. I'd love to get on Paul Chek and Aubrey Marcus. Okay, logically, I think it'll take me about 5 or 10 years to be able to get, them to pay attention to me. Happened in a year and a half. Why? Because I just kept following the fun. I just kept following the fun. I kept going to different retreats, meeting people that knew so-and-so. Then I ended up at Chek's house. From my love, I wanted to gift him some cannabis. He thought it was wild, needed more of it. Was like, how do I get more of it? I was like, I'll give you as much as you want. He's like, well, I got to do something for you in return. I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, hey, can I connect you to other people? I'm like, sure. And he connects me to Aubrey Marcus. Like, that's literally how that happened. It's crazy. I didn't like have a master plan of like, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. I didn't spend a lot of money to do it. I just allowed love to lead the way for me. I allowed my real authenticity and what I do best, just being myself, like we all have the ability to do, to lead me into fun things with fun people. And that's really all I've done. I've fallen into my little moments of like, oh, I'm taking myself too seriously again. And then when I remember again, like, oh my God, I was just doing that thing again. It's hilarious. And the more you dive in this direction, I think just the funnier everything gets, the funnier the entertainment show gets, because again, in a dream, nothing real can be threatened. And nothing real is truly here except God. And so at the end of the day, if you've never been born, really, it's just been the illusion of being born, you can never die. And so as you start to like embody that, because like you were saying at the beginning, I forget what it was, but you were talking about something that I talk about is the dichotomy between knowing and realizing something. So like I knew a lot of things. Like I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted a podcast, but yet I wasn't doing it. It took me realizing it, which is like making it real for the eye. It's like embodiment for me to actually make that change. And so I think that like, as you start to embody that more and more, as I have anyway, this is what's happened. And it's happening all the time. Rachel's been an amazing teacher of this for me. Honestly, I mean, she's pretty much one of my main mentors at this point of living in this way. And it's been extremely helpful, So I will say, it's just a caveat. Any of you men out there, pay attention to the women in your life, okay? Sorry, not sorry. They're more full of wisdom. All right. We do a lot of things that are awesome. Okay. I'm not dissing men, but there are some certain things about what really matters that women have the incredible ability to remind us of just by being themselves and their feminine. And so really tune into that. All right. Like be silly, have fun. That's the most important thing you can do, because again, this dream is just that. It's a dream. And the whole point is to have the best dream possible. So whatever is going to do that, do it, is my advice.
Man, I think that's the perfect way to wrap up this episode. Awesome.
So
Thank
fun.
you so much for joining me again today, Ryan. What a powerful and fun conversation with Ryan Sprague. I am looking forward to his Coaching with Cannabis program myself and learning directly from the cannabis guy. So if this episode sparked your curiosity about conscious cannabis work, be sure to check out Ryan's offerings at therealryansprague.com. I'll put that in the show notes so you can click there as well. And remember, your words create your world. Your breath connects you back to your heart, and your community amplifies your growth. Until next time, stay connected, stay conscious, and keep coming back to the heart.